Hey everyone, welcome to this fantastic interview edition of the Electronic Cafe. Mark and I have had the absolute pleasure of talking to Mark Shaw, Then Jerico. Bit like with Rob and Humanist, I'm like you this time, mate. I'm a bit speechless how amazingly honest he was and fascinating conversation.
Again, I mean, we tend to be going through our whole record collection and speaking to the people that we love and who we grew up listening to. And I mean, we said to Mark when we spoke to him a few moments ago that, Then Jericho were one of the bands we used to play in the car. We used to play in the studio before we rehearsed. They was always on the PA. We used to listen to them. So to actually speak to Mark Shaw, Then Jericho, the man behind these songs that mean so much to us, like the Motive and Big Area, songs like that. And of course, he's worked with, Mick McNeil from Simple Minds. He's worked with Andy Taylor from Duran Duran. It's a fascinating story and a real insight into the politics of record companies and how it all works and how difficult it is for artists to actually make music.
I think also our audience will love the story of like from way back. Yeah, such a is unsettled the right word, upbringing as a youngster, and yet that kind of built a fighting spirit in him that I was blown away by to get where he got.
Should we dive in and let everyone see what we spoke about?
Yeah, everyone. Mark and I really hope you enjoyed this fantastic conversation with the incredible Mark Shaw from Then Jericho.
This little thing, it was quite the hardest thing to do.
I've opened my one. You haven't opened your one.
You notice I've got it's all shiny. That's right. I'm gonna sell it on eBay.
Listen, welcome to another amazing interview edition of Electronic Cafe. Our guest today lit up our turntables in the late 80s with some massive anthemic songs that sound as good today as they did then. Mark Shaw, Then Jericho, welcome to Electronic Cafe, my friend. It's so good to have you on the EC.
Cheers, guys. Thank you both for inviting me. It's a privilege to be here.
Cheers, Mark.
Lovely to have you here. And great to see you're back on the road. Live dates that we'll put on our video when it goes out of where you're
Thank you. Yeah, I'm out there slogging, polishing the public again, thrashing that same old dead horse, It's got to be done.
Oh, man, they're not dead horses. They're great tracks. And really, really keen to. And I think London at the end of this month, if I remember right.
That's right, on the 29th. Yeah, if you want to come, you're very welcome.
Oh, we'll certainly be there. Definitely. Mate, do you still, I mean, obviously, you're very experienced at doing this performance there. Do you still get the same buzz when you're playing?
Yeah, I do. I mean, what I do is that I have always had this, I kind of need to desperately show off in front of people. So it's sort of, But I think that every time I play the songs, somebody once said that you breathe new life into them every time you sing them. If you live them. And I just really get myself into the zone and remember when I wrote them and what I wrote them about and kind of focus on that, almost like I hate to sound pretentious, but like a method type thing, like a method acting type thing, where you kind of live the moment. And so that kind of transports me to a place whereby it's for me, it's like a visceral experience. I actually feel it as deeply as I did when I first wrote it. So even though that can be it's tiring and it's a bit, it's harrowing sometimes for some of the darker songs. But if you let yourself go into that, I think a lot of artists, they just sing the songs, they just sing them. They think about the melody and not the lyrics so much. Whereas I concentrate deeply on them. If you listen to my singing, clearly not on the melody. But I get myself going to that place when I wrote it. And that means that I never get bored with them. And the guys in the band, I'm really lucky. I've got an amazing band. who play the songs really well, and they're never the same twice. They're always slightly different, which keeps us interested, keeps it fresh. And as long as people want to hear them, I want to keep playing them. You know.
But the first song I ever heard of yours, Mark, was "The Motive."
Oh right.
And do you know, every so often the songs come along where you just think shit, like, and you just play it over and over again. I mean, that was one of those songs that, for me, was just like an amazing song. How did you get into music? I mean, what was the calling that dragged you into music?
Well, I grew up listening to music from a very young age. Bought my first single when I was 4 years old, which was "Reach Out, I'll Be There" by the Four Tops. So it was always kind of an obsession of mine. My parents were really into music. No one in the family was musical. Nobody played anything. So I can't say like there was a piano knocking around or anything. So my only recourse and my only kind of access to music was just through the radio and through records. But my parents did buy vinyl, and they had a very, very wide taste. My dad used to buy a lot of jazz, everything from big band jazz through to things like George Shearing and Pedler's modern jazz, and things like Jacques Lussier Trio, who took Bach's symphonies and reworked them in jazz time signatures. So I was exposed to all this, and people like Scott Walker, they used to buy. I mean, not just the Walker Brothers, but Scott Walker's albums, as well as, of course, the Beatles. And my dad would play me things like Brooke Benton and Nat King Cole, Sarah Vaughan. So I listened to all this kind of unusual music. Then, of course, the Beatles at the same time. So I was just surrounded by this. And what it was is we moved a lot. My dad used to be a docker. He was from the shipyards in Newcastle. And we moved all over the country. I mean, I went to like about 14 different schools, literally. And we moved home every couple of years. But more than that, I mean, we lived at one point, I think we moved to 4 different places in 1 year. I was always the new kid. And often it would take me a while to get into school, to actually get a place in school. So sometimes I'd be left at home with just the radio and the record player. So it was my way of escaping these new surroundings and these very foreign environments I find myself in. And it was something that gave me a kind of security and a warmth and a place to go to. So I grew up with those records meaning a lot to me and being my best friends. And I was quite a loner as a kid because I was always the new kid. Didn't make many friends. And if I did, they didn't last very long because I'd always end up moving. And this continued right up into my early teens and my mid-teens when I ended up getting kicked out of home. My parents split up and I was sort of on the street by the age of about 16. So records were the main thing that tethered me to any kind of reality of my past, the places I'd been. So it seemed inevitable to me that I would end up trying to make records because I loved them. It was the only thing that really excited me. As much as I enjoyed books, I loved football, but I was crap at it. I was rubbish at it. And I was always at a new school. I was always, waiting to get in the team and never getting picked because I was a new kid and because I was crap. So, so music was that one thing that sort of seemed to lend me a sense of identity. And then I kind of ended up on the street and I was living in a squat and trying to get jobs and just couldn't get jobs or couldn't get the jobs I wanted.
Yeah.
So I met someone who was in a band and I was hanging out with him one night and he was a keyboard player from a band called The Doll who had a hit called Desire Me and had a kind of one-hit wonder. So he was hanging out with me and one day he said, come around my place and he had his keyboard there. And he started playing, and we had Hunky Dory on. And I was singing, still singing along as I used to. And he looked at me and he said, you can sing every note on that record. I said, astonishing. Now, I clearly couldn't, but he believed me. He believed that I could because of the passion I put behind it. Yeah. And he said, you need to try writing songs. So I said, well, I've kind of written some lyrics. So we sat down, and I got the lyrics out, and I only had like one bag of stuff that I used to carry around with me. Got them out. Sang the words to him. He put some music to it. Then he looked at me and he went, so how many more you got? I said, well, that's it. That's the first thing I've ever written. And he just said, right, sod this, I'm going to give up music. He said, if that's the first thing you've ever written, he said, I've been doing this for 10 years. And if you can do that now at your first song, he said, I can't make music anymore. So I kind of entered his career. If that's your starting point, that's way better than anything I've ever written. And I still remember it to this day, funnily enough. So he said, you need to do this. You really need to do this. So you need to go and audition for bands. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but I ended up looking in Melody Maker and looking for adverts, because I always read Melody Maker and NME kind of religiously anyway. They were like my Bibles. Saw an advert for the band Fashion. It just said name band, yeah. A legendary early electronic pioneers, you know, Mulligan, what a genius, keyboard genius. And Mulligan, I mean, influenced so many people like Midge, having spoken to Midge and about these things. He was a real curveball. He brought so many unusual sonic techniques into the industry. Isn't really given the credit for it, except for those of us, of course, in the know. So this advert said, name band, seek singer with a style and whatever. Now, because I used to go to the Blitz, I knew Steve Strange. So I borrowed an outfit from Steve, this long black, it was like about a 6-foot black velvet scarf that went down to your knees. An outfit made by Stephen Linnard, who was an 80s designer. And so I put that on, got a train up, found out it was Fashion, went up to, bought that. I'd already bought 2 other singles anyway. Got a train up to Birmingham. By this point, I was living in a tiny little flat with my girlfriend, working, cleaning the toilets in a club called the Daisy on Charlotte Street up in London. So I'd had these sort of really awful jobs that I would never last. I mean, I had 37 jobs and I got fired from all of them. So it was like every week I was looking for another job to try and pay the rent. So I got on a train to Birmingham, went up and auditioned. Then they sort of looked at me and they said, "Hang on, wait a minute, what was that you're singing? You're singing these different words." And I went, "Oh, well, I made my own words up." And they went, "Well, that's not the idea. Well, you're supposed to sing the lyrics for the songs." I went, "Oh, right." So we posted them to you because there was no fax in those days or anything. We posted them to you. Didn't you get them? So I said, "No, so I made my own words up." So Mulligan sort of scratched his head and he said, "Look, I'll give you an hour. Go out." He said, and you know, they gave me, I think I had a cassette player, a little portable cassette player. And he said, "Go out." Because this is before Walkmans even. Oh, so go out and I'll listen to this on cassette and come back and sing the song. So I came back and he went, "Now you're not even singing the same notes." He said, "You're singing your own stuff." So he sat me down. He said, "Look, you look great, but you can't fucking sing." He said, "But you've got these great ideas. So what you need to do, mate, is you need to go out and form your own band." And he was lovely to me. And he spent time, he said, "We really like you and you seem a really nice guy." And when they found out I'd come from London, and they said, "What, you came all the way?" Well, I spent everything I had. He said, he came all the way just to do this for us. Wow. I said, "Yeah, I really want to do this." So he then spent about 2 hours going through ideas with me and me singing my musical. He said, "Just sing me what you were singing to our music." So I sang him the words and lyric and melodies I was singing incorrectly to their songs. And he said, "Well, you're kind of writing your own songs here." And he gave me some sort of contact numbers of studios and stuff and said, "Look, just go out and form your own band, put an advert in Melody Maker, form a band. It's not that difficult." He said, "If you just do what you're doing now and get people to play chords behind what you're singing, you'll have songs." So that's kind of how it all started, really. Wow. And so I went back to London, feeling kind of, God, I've got to start, because I wanted to just go straight into the industry. And I thought, this is it. I can dance a bit. I look all right. I can do this. Convinced I'd get the gig. And they kept me on hold for a couple of weeks. And finally, I got a phone call. I just had to go down to the phone box downstairs. And I waited for ages for this phone call and finally got this call. Kept getting letters saying, "We'll call you on this date, call you on that date." And they said, "It's between you and another singer." And it was a guy called Dee Harris, who ended up becoming a singer in Fashion. And he said, "It was really close." He said, "We really thought we would go with you. But Dee, he's got his own songs. He plays an instrument and he can sing in tune." So that kind of really helps. And of course, Dee Harris is a god, amazing looking man, very talented. And they went on to make some beautiful records like Love Shadow and stuff. But it inspired me. So then I went for another audition for a band called Naked Lunch.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. This is early electro days, of course. And because I ended up knowing, I met the bass player. I was living in the middle of London, and I bumped into the bass player at one of the clubs, like Studio 21. And they were looking for a singer, but the singer didn't know they were looking for a singer. So I went along for the audition without the singer knowing. It's quite embarrassing. And they went, going here, guy. He said, he's from Yorkshire. He said, do you know what? He said, you look good. He said, you can't sing though. He said, what's the matter with you? He said, I thought you were a singer. And I went, well, I'm like, yeah. He said, you're a front man. You're a great front man, but you cannot sing. Go and learn to sing. So having on with all this, I then went out and just did scales and learned to sort of listen to records and did scales. Couldn't afford singing lessons. Kept getting fired from jobs. And then just thought, sod this. Right, so I put an advert in Melody Maker. And it just, I knew I'd done a little bit of work selling advertising. This is the longest. I've become Rusty Egan, haven't I?
No, you haven't. No, you haven't.
I ended up putting this advert in, and because I'd sold advertising space for a magazine for a short while until I got fired, I knew that if you started an advert with the letter A, I used to sell the column ads, so I knew if you started an advert with the letter A, it would go right to the top of the listings, because I knew that when people read adverts in magazines, column adverts, they would always start at the very top. So I started A Boy with Style. So it had AB. Meant it got right to the top of the listing, and just put this phone number of the phone box downstairs. And I kind of hogged the phone box for about a week and just stood and it's busy. It's out of order. Put an out of order sign in it and everything. The whole thing. And I took my wages and just got 2p coins as they were in those days and waited for the phone to ring. And it did ring. And I got loads and I got like 30 calls.
Wow.
From people that were interested, because it did say A Boy with Style with record deal, management, publishing and world tour.
Yeah, that'll get the phone ringing.
Yeah, that got the phone ringing. And so having never really auditioned a band before, I got a hired rehearsal room and I auditioned about 30 people in one room all at the same time, because I didn't know you got them in one by one. So everyone was just coming in. Everyone was going, how big is this fucking band? It's like, this is a really big band. And everyone was plugged in. And people were leaving. They got can hear myself. There was a sax player who said, I'm just in the wind. I can't hear myself. So they started to leave. So I ended up in a room with about 10 people. And I chose the ones that I could hear. I figured the ones that I could hear that looked the best would be the ones for me, because I wanted them loud and I wanted them cool. And the ones that kind of said, yeah, I get this. You want this kind of cacophonous wall of sound. And at the time, it was going to be called Terminal Drive after the Sparks album. So that's where the TJ came from Then Jerico. And so we sort of kept rehearsing. I started rehearsing this band and singing my melodies to them. And we'd try a few covers. I'd try and sing Bowie and stuff. And after a while, they all went, look, where's this world tour and where's the management? Oh, they're coming soon. They're on their way. They're stuck in traffic. And I just BS'd everybody for ages until a couple of them chucked it in and said, you're lying to us. And then the three or four that remained, I said, okay, there's no record deal, there's no tour. But by then we were getting somewhere. We were creating a sound. And I realized that what I wanted was this sound of a really deep, solid, almost impenetrable sound, something that's similar to what the Psychedelic Furs and the other underground were creating.
Yeah.
And I wanted a band that sounded like a cross between Gang of Four and Shriekback, who were in their very early years then. But I wanted something that kind of sounded a lot like the music I was listening to.
Yeah.
So Shriekback, of course, came slightly later, but I mean, I was listening to all the electro stuff from the Blitz, so everything that Rusty was playing and that Chris Sullivan was playing at Hell was influencing massive. And of course, it was being played down at Billy's. as well. So, which of course was the pre-runner to the Blitz. So all that music I was hearing, all that electro stuff, people like La Dusseldorf and Kraftwerk, I wanted that, but I also wanted the thump and the roar of the Skids and the Furs and Magazine and all those sort of bands. End up sounding like some sort of lightweight version of all of them, I think. So never really achieved it. But
those group of people, they whittled down. They were Then Jericho. Okay, you signed to London Records in '86 or whenever. How easy was it for you to get signed around that time? Was there a lot of competition for Then Jericho, or was it a struggle?
Yeah, it was. There was actually. What it was that there was. Well, first of all, what I did was I rehearsed this band for a year. We kept changing lineup. People kept leaving. I kept auditioning people and once I learnt how to audition people, I then got them in until I got a lineup of 6 musicians: guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, and a backing vocalist. Because again, I wasn't great as a singer, and I went out and started blagging gigs. I dispensed with the name Terminal Jive and called the band The Anniversary. And I had my mate from the band The Doll used to take me to this club called Monkberry's that was like a private members club in middle of London. A very fancy place where all these high rollers would go. But Trevor Shakes was the DJ, and quite a lot of cool musicians would go there. I went and I blagged a gig. And I saw Belouis Sum playing a showcase there, funnily enough, with what became my guitarist, Scott Taylor. Was playing with them, funnily enough. That's an odd thing that will happen. But anyway, so I went and blagged the owner and said, look, I need a gig. I got this band, I want a gig. She said, are you good? I said, well, great. We're brilliant. We're fantastic. We'd done a demo by this point, so I gave it to him. He said, all right, I'll give you a gig. So we got 25 quid, which was a lot of money in those days. And we had a 25-minute slot. And I wrote a song. One of the guys on audition was a guy called George Murphy from Dublin. And I walked in one day and sang "Let Her Fall" to him. And he went, it's a great song. I told him what to play. This is great. That's a hit. So we played about 4 or 5 songs at this show at Monkberry's. And Phil Conn, who was became the guitarist in Def Leppard, he was just about to leave the band he was in. And he came to me and he said, that was really good. If that's your first gig, that's astonishing. That's great. You've really got a future. And he said, I'm about to join a band. I'd never actually joined Def Leppard or Tigers of Pantang. So I said, well, it's got to be Def Leppard, man. They're going places, right? Because they didn't release one album at that point. So, but having had that feedback from him and from a lot of the musicians that would go to the club, I knew that I had something. So I then went back, and my guitarist George unfortunately had to go back to Dublin for personal reasons. So I auditioned another guitarist, and this is when I put together the 6-piece band. And we rehearsed for about a year. Then I went out and started blagging gigs and walked into the Half Moon in Putney, which was a pub in Herne Hill, rather. Sorry, there's one in Putney. In Herne Hill.
We played that one, yeah.
Did you really? Yeah. Oh, you know it. Of course, it had a back room, didn't it? Because it wasn't really a pub. Because my ethos was, I'm not going to play pubs. I'm going to play clubs. Having played Monkberry's, I thought, I'm only going to play clubs. And I'd worked at the Embassy Club as well as a busboy and a waiter and then a barman, and then became a DJ there, the sort of the part-time DJ. So I knew the clubs. So I thought, well, we're not going to play. Couldn't get a gig at the Embassy yet. I thought, we're not going to play pubs. But the Half Moon said to me, look, if you can sell 100 tickets, we will give you a headline gig. So I went out and I just blagged everybody I knew, and we used to go to markets every morning, 6 a.m, go to every London market, hand out flyers. And I did this for about 6 months until I got guaranteed, I knew I'd get an audience. Did this first gig, it was 1983. Played one show, changed the name at this point to Then Jerico. Did this one gig, and we pulled about 150 people. Nice. And blew the room away. It was great. I was absolutely amazed at the response, and people were dancing and they were cheering, and I was like, this is amazing. And then at that point, I got approached by London Records and by a scout from RCA straight away, and they said, "We're interested. Keep us informed." On the back of that, I went to the Embassy Club, spoke to the owner, and said, "You've got to give me." He fired me. By the way, so I've been fired from the Embassy for playing Killing Joke while I was up in the DJ booth, and the club was empty. I'd plugged a 58 into the desk, and I was belting Requiem and War Dance, Requiem down the microphone, not realizing that it was being piped downstairs into the restaurants, the very expensive restaurants. So all these people are listening, eating a very expensive foie gras and drinking champagne, having me screaming my tits off down the microphone. And the owner came up and he went, he called everybody Mary. He said, "Mary, you're fired. You got a voice. You got a career." I went back, and a guy called Mark Fuller bought the club. I went back and I saw Mark and I said, "Look, I used to work here. I need a gig." So he gave me a gig, did that gig, and NME came down. And we did a gig. It was for a gig, a sort of anti-heroin gig. It was for support for heroin detox centers. And NME wrote about us. And they said, when Let Her Fall and Stable Boy are both ex-top 40, Then Jerico will disappear into the ether. This got record companies very excited because quite a few record companies were there. And because it was all new bands on that bill.
Yeah.
And the record companies got really excited. And they said, well, this says you're going to have a couple of hits. So even if you don't have any more, according to the press, you're going to have hits. So at this point, we started getting record companies after us. And then I did another show at the Embassy. And then I discovered the new music seminar was taking place in New York, the first ever new music seminar. So I went, that's where we got to play. But of course, it was only for signed bands. So my brother flew me out to New York. My brother was an ice skater and he was living in Australia. And as a birthday present, he flew me out to meet him in New York for 2 nights and put me in the Waldorf, which is very kind of him. So I took the bass player Jasper with me. And I said, this is an opportunity. We're going to go bang on some doors. We're going to get ourselves some gigs and get a record deal. So we went and we just hammered on doors for 2 days and walked the street. And it was a heat wave and we were dying. It was like 120 degrees, 110 degrees. It was seriously hot. We went and banged on every door, gave away every cassette that we had. We only had 3. And then we started saying, well, we don't do demos. No, we don't need demos. We're massive. Haven't you heard of us? We're Then Jerico. So everyone was like, okay. If you get a gig, we'll come see you.
It's all our praise to you by Prairie Rose. I'm not sure I can't explain the strange allure. A prairie rose, a crown of thorns, a scented flower.
We then went and started to go and see clubs, and we found out the new music seminar was happening. And the only place that hadn't had a live band was this club called the Limelight, which was a church. And we found out the Jacksons were going to be doing a PA launching the album Victory when Michael had rejoined. So I said, that is the place we're going to play because it's the only place that hasn't got any, because all the clubs had bands on. The new music seminar, all the English bands showcased to American labels, and American bands showcased to English labels. That's kind of how it works. So I went down, I blagged a gig. I said, we're amazing. They gave me $2,000. I talked to him to give me $2,000. And they said, we don't have live bands. And I said, you do now. You're going to have the first live band. And everybody wanted to go from the industry. Every single person. There was like 1,000 people. Wow. Everyone wanted to go because it was a Limelight. It was the place. Nobody could get in, because you had to, queue up for an hour and be a celebrity. And because the Jacksons were playing this. So they played the night before, but they mimed. So we were the first live band that ever played there, and we rammed it. And I actually blagged 2 more shows, one at a place called Danceteria and one at a club called Pyramid. That was like a trans gay club. And the people that ran the Limelight said, well, you're not doing those shows. We'll give you $500 for every show you don't do. So I thought, this is great. So we got offered $1,000, and then they said, we'll give you $500 for each show. So I cancelled Danceteria and cancelled the other club, Pyramid, and got given $2,000. So this is great. I'm being paid not to play.
That's
the thing is how a lot of promoters feel these days. So at this point, when it came back to London, called all my mates from the Blitz and from the Beetroot and the club. Got a gig at the Beetroot, which is a club just off on Greek Street, and then it was a French restaurant, but it was very cool. Like Chris Sullivan used to run it, and all the Blitz kids used to go there. And then we played the WAG Club, and at this point we had 7 record companies after us.
Wow.
And we then just sat down and made the wrong decision to choose London Records.
I mean, London Records at the time, they had, I think, the Communards, Bananarama. They were kind of like big label.
Well, it was Bronski beat then, Mark. Actually, yeah, before the Communards. Yeah. What attracted us? They're an indie label. They had the Redskins, who were very political, and they had the Bluebells, who were very political on their first couple of albums before they were kind of forced into becoming too commercial. So we liked the fact that they had bands that were melodic. And very, very different, as you say, Bronski beat. And because the fact they had all these unusual bands, and they had quite a few labels that would people like that had they would distribute different labels, and all these really unusual bands. And I thought I like this label because they're different and they're very kind of very spread demographic of people attracted to this label. So it isn't sort of like just an indie label. It's an indie label with pop sensibilities. That's what attracted me. But to be honest, I wanted to sign to Virgin. And it was because I'm a socialist and we're all... The idea was that everyone in the band would have a say. And the 3 other guys that voted me out, and they wanted to sign to London. So we signed to London. We'd only done 7 gigs before we'd signed.
Wow.
So we did, because I was very good at creating hype and I knew how to go out. And Gary Crowley, bless his cotton socks, Gary gave us a radio session about 3 weeks before we got signed to London. So that really ramped things up and gave us an in-session thing. So that suddenly we were getting gigs. We were playing all these places. We were on the radio. I got a page in Time Out because I knew a photographer who worked there. So we took a picture of me and they gave us a full-page feature in Time Out. So suddenly we were like the happening unsigned band. But it was all hype, really.
Time as an ideal movement, disarranging signs of the way. So living through the holes that were left by the others, waiting for some word on today. Just one for somebody's thinking, when this takes the teaching, another price to be paid.
I think that when Big Area came out, and you guys were kind of in full flight, were you aware of the storm you were creating in a good way? I mean, it's like, to us, I mean, as Mark said, we used to listen to your stuff when we were in rehearsal studio, and you just seemed like you were becoming massive. Did you feel that when you were kind of in that? Because the videos, I mean, I looked at the Big Area video, for example, it still looks great, and the younger people that I know, like my daughters, I told them I was chatting to you, and no disrespect, they were like, well, we don't know. And I said, listen to this. And half of them went, oh, yeah, I've heard that before. So there's still that sort of, right? And in that time, though, were you, I'm just interested to know, because Mark and I tried to get access and we didn't, but, we've met loads of people that have. But when you were so big at that point, was you aware of that, or? Not
really. It was odd because I tell you what happened, Andy, it was one of those things that we released, like, the first single, The Big Sweep, was released and London wouldn't put it out because they decided that the lyric was... I stupidly told them that it was about Murdoch and Maxwell. And all it was is that I'd read a piece in something in The Face magazine, a quote from Rupert Murdoch, where he said there was a thin line and sometimes no line between entertainment and news. So I took that. Now, there's nothing political in the lyric at all. And it's nothing about... I didn't name check anybody. But because I told the record company it was about Murdoch and Maxwell, I did an interview saying that. All I meant was it was about press interference and how the press kind of, how the press lie and manipulate people. That's all it was. But meaning the tabloids, not meaning the press in general. London just had kittens and said, we can't release this. So as we recorded it at Martin Rushent's studio, it was owned by Martin Rushent, and Nigel Revler was his manager, and he managed Pete Shelley from the Buzzcocks. And Pete had his own label called Immaculate. So he said, well, we'll put it out for you. So we stuck out The Big Sweep on did 1,000 copies only on Immaculate. And Immaculate, London said, you can't sign to them, you sign to us. I went, no, we fucking well can. So we stuck out 1,000 copies. It went to number 12 in the indie charts. And this got us a lot of press attention. Then we had a track called Fault, which BBC Micro Live, a television program, came down to film us while we were recording it. And we decided we wanted to use the latest technology. And Martin had started using synclaviers and Fairlights on the Human League for the Dare album. So we said we want to use one of those. So of course, not realizing what that was going to cost. So we got filmed doing Fault. And it created a certain amount of interest. But London said, well, we got it remixed in New York, but London still didn't think it was a hit record. So they only released 10,000 of those. So we had the first two singles that were kind of like non-starters, but they sold pretty quickly because they were in short supply. And so we called them limited edition rather than nobody wants to release our music, which is what really was the truth. So we kept thinking we weren't going to get anywhere. Then we put Let Her Fall out, and that bounced off the charts, went to about 70 or something. And then we put out Muscle Deep, similar fate, and we were getting radio play, but we just weren't selling singles. So London's end, we then did the cover of Prairie Rose. I, by this point, had co-produced the first album because I kept walking out on producers, kept falling out with producers. And finally, Steve Brown rang me up after having walked out on him, bless his cop, so lovely, lovely guy. He said, look, Mark, you don't need a producer because you are a producer. He said, you know what you need is a great engineer. So Owen Davis, who was Steve's engineer, bless Owen, I can't ever thank him enough. He agreed to engineer. I convinced London to let me co-produce the record. And we did a version of Prairie Rose. And London wanted to put that out as a single. Now, I knew it wasn't going to be a single in its own form, its initial form. So we went into a studio with Greg Walsh, went to Eel Pie Studios, which was owned by Pete Townsend. Absolute genius and a lovely man who was really, really cool to us. Tuned the guitars for us, did everything.
Wow.
I know, yes, seriously. Pete's an absolute, he's just one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. So encouraging. We ended up overdubbing Prairie Rose and putting a lot more synths on it and put out a more electro version of it, which Radio 1 loved, but the music press hated and the public didn't really like. So that went to number 70. So we thought, this is it, it's all over. They finally said, London said, right, we're going to put out the Motive. And if the Motive isn't a hit, we're going to drop you. So put the Motive out, and it crawled up the charts. And then it got to about number 40. And then Gallup, who were compiling the charts at the time, decided that London Records were hyping the Fine Young Cannibals. They said, hang on, you're doing something funny here. And what they'd done is they'd mixed up the barcodes, and they'd put the Fine Young Cannibals barcode on our record. Now, I don't know. Yeah, well, I don't know how accidental it was. A little bit strange that. But put it this way, so for every record that we were selling, the Fine and Cannibals were getting the credit for it. But, no problem with the Cannibals. They're lovely geezers.
Oh, yeah.
So what happened was Gallup then weighted the Motive. They handicapped it. So it got to number 40, and we thought we got Top of the Pops, brilliant. And then they busted it back to number 45 or number 42. So then we didn't get Top of the Pops. So that was it. We were going to get dropped. So I said, it's over. Got on a plane, flew back to New York with my wife at the time, and I hadn't had a holiday in about 10 years. So I went for 5 days to New York, and I get a phone call from the head of the company. It's gone back into the charts. You better get on the plane. You better get on the plane now.